to go? Yep.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event. We're very pleased to see you here. We're going to talk about technology mechanism and fostering technology update to support NDC implementation and greater ambition. We have a really interesting event lined up. We're going to hear from a few different speakers. I'll introduce them as we go through the evening. We're also going to hear the launch of a joint publication on technology in NDC, followed by a panel discussion to dive into some of the findings and some of the applications of this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor to Stefan Minaz, who's the chair of the Technology Executive Committee, TEC, to give a brief welcome and opening. So Stefan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Amanda, and welcome, dear colleagues, to this Technology Mechanism side event here in Glasgow. It's a delight that we can gather here together, those of us in the room certainly, and it is our pleasure as the Technology Mechanism, the TEC, and also the Climate Technology Centre and Network to present our work, certainly during this unprecedented period in our lives, but more particularly to launch this new joint publication, indeed the first ever joint publication of the TEC and the CTCN on technology and NDCs. So really a new step in our collaboration and our joint work. Colleagues, as we know, the Paris Agreement highlights the key role of technology in implementing mitigation and adaptation climate action. The technology framework, which is under the Paris Agreement, established in 2018, provides overarching guidance to the work of the TEC and the CTCN in facilitating enhanced climate technology action. In 2020, responding to the request of the parties to the Paris Agreement, the TEC and the CTCN's advisory board agreed their first ever joint activities. And these include activities on technology and NDCs, which we'll be presenting tonight, but also activities on the very important topic of technology and gender. So as part of our work on technologies and NDCs, we have the report that we are launching tonight. And this publication focuses on technology needs, technology challenges, linkages between policy and implementation, and of course linkages between NDCs and national adaptation plans. Importantly, the report is accompanied by recommendations to parties, recommendations which the parties are considering this week and indeed next week. The TEC, of course, looks forward to continuing our collaboration with the CTCN in additional areas as well, to make our joint contribution to climate action, the climate action that we need to bring into being a climate resilient and net zero world. So I'm delighted to be joined by the experts on the panel tonight. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion and also your engagement in our discussion. So I think that's enough from me, and I pass the floor back. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stefan. And I was so excited to get the event started that I realized I forgot to introduce myself as well to all of you, but my name is Amanda McKee. I'm going to be chairing tonight's session. I work with the NDC Partnership Support Unit. And for those of you who don't know us, we are a collaboration of institutions and governments from around the world who are working to help countries to implement and raise the ambition of their NDCs. So for us, this is a really timely event. Technology is actually something that we see a lot in the requests coming through from countries. Of the different requests that we've received over the years, technology is actually included in about 6% of them, which seems small, but for such a specific topic, it's so important. If you look at the number of countries, actually 71% of the countries that were supported have requested some sort of support on technology. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what the experts have to say tonight, how we can carry this forward into our work and raise capacity around this. So with that, I want to turn to our next speakers. We're going to hear next from Rose Mwabaza, who is the director of CTCN, to share some highlights a brief overview of achievement for the technology mechanism in 2020 to 2021. So Rose, over to you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. We do some really interesting work on NDC implementation under the NDC partnership, so we are very proud to partner with you and to be part of that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really very glad that we are able to gather here again this evening on this important issue. The COVID-19 pandemic has placed a lot of pressure on the countries that we serve as the CTCN. Nevertheless, since COP25, when we last met in a room like this in Madrid, the CTCN, in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic, has received 92 requests from member states for technical assistance to accelerate the transfer of climate technologies. So from the last time we met you in Madrid, the number of countries we've served has risen to 107, and the technology transfers that we've enabled in these countries has risen to 361. To give you a sense of what we cover in the support we give to the countries, 26% of all the eligible support we provide has come from requests from LDCs, 11% from seeds, and 47% of the requests cover mitigation objectives, while 30% cover adaptation. And we have 23 that we consider to have core benefits, 23% that we consider to have core benefits of both mitigation and adaptation. We have a lot of detail. We have produced a detailed account of what we've been able to achieve. So if you pass by our pavilion, we'll give you some copies, or you can find this online on our website. But just to tell you that across the areas of service that we provide, we are aiming for direct efforts towards initiatives that offer the greatest potential for transformational impact. The reason we do that is because when we got to the member states, we really wanted to be catalytic in the support we have. So this requires us really to focus on a combination of policy interventions and actions, which are not only focused on technology, but also in economic and other feasibility studies. And then we also focus on a multi-level approach and long-term perspective to strengthen the potential for transformational change. We want our work to leave a lasting impact. We also focus on those interventions that we believe will provide sustained change to ensure that there is no relapse in the interventions we provide when we leave. And then, of course, lastly, we avoid providing predefined or predetermined solutions. So our work is demand-driven by the member states. It is embedded in their NDCs, in their national action plans, in their technology needs assessment. So it's really part of their national policy frameworks. So the CTCN has facilitated a wide range of innovative and fruitful collaborations, including providing training to our NDEs on blockchain technologies. I see our network member, Blockchain Institute, that partners with us on this. They are a UK-based company here with us. And we continue to do a lot of important work that our chair, Stefan, has mentioned on gender and technology. We are very proud to be doing this work with the UNFCCC gender constituency. But we are also fostering youth engagement in technology. And so we are very proud of the work we do in the Youth Climate Innovation Labs, which we've done in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America. Our work on innovation also includes a joint work program we are doing with the UNDP for $10 million with funding from the Adaptation Fund that focuses on adaptation technologies. There's a lot I could tell you. But as you also know, as has been reported by the GCF, but also ourselves, the CTCN is also now the largest provider of GCF readiness support for technology, implementing 75% of all the GCF readiness-related work that is related to technology. We have continued to focus by delivering on the 5 themes of the technology framework as provided for in Article 10 of the Paris Agreement, and in the past year, we have seen several trends emerging in the over 100 countries we serve. I'll just share some of these with you. Digitization is a big trend that we see, and we've worked with several countries in this area. For example, we've worked in Mali, where we are working with the country to identify technologies, methods, and services for data collection to improve climate forecasting, early warning and adaptation planning, and decision-making for the agricultural sector. Energy systems is another big trend we see in the requests we get from the member states, and here the CTCN has supported several countries in transforming their energy systems with renewable energy technologies, energy efficiency, and now I'm glad that Leonardo is here. A new trend emerging under energy's request for green hydrogen, and this is something that we are looking forward to working with members. Nature-based solutions is also a big trend that we see in the work we do, and so we are assisting several countries implementing their nature-based solutions that demonstrate their effectiveness in cross-cutting areas such as disaster risk reduction, water resource management, biodiversity, and climate resilience. For example, as part of the work we are doing to support countries on nature-based solutions, we've worked with the government of Kenya and its to support the development of a 10-year national agroforestry strategy. The strategy is very important because it will enable the government of Kenya to ensure that it maintains a 10% coverage of its forestry and also contribute to around 50% of Kenya's goal of abating around 4.2 million tons of CO2 emissions by 2030. Urban systems is another big trend that we see in the requests from the member states we serve. And here really the requests tend to be around cities, support for cities and use of energy and e-mobility in the cities. As you know from the work of the IPCC, 70% of all global emissions really are coming from all the large cities. And because we service developing countries, a lot of these are where the large populations are. We are also receiving requests on building efficiency and e-mobility. I could give you a whole range of things we are doing. But as I said, please do look up our report. It has a lot of detail for every technical assistance we've offered in every country, in all the 107 countries I've told you about. As I close, just to tell you that this year is very critical. The member states, as they sit here this week, are considering the second independent review of the CTCN that is undertaken by the UNFCCC Secretariat. We are very grateful for the guidance from the member states and the Secretariat. And we really look forward to the approval of the third program of work and to continue some of the joint activities with the Technology Executive Committee that Stefan was talking about. But of course, to ensure that we continue to meet the high demand that we are getting from developing countries, including on loss and damage. 20% of all our requests are related to loss and damage. We continue to seek funding extensively. And on the 8th, under the patronage of the UK COP presidency, there will be a meeting of our donors to have a conversation on how they can come up with a long-term plan for the sustainable funding of the CTCN. So I want to thank you very much and to say I really look forward to the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rose. And Stefan, I think I'm turning it back to you to add to this, so please, the floor is yours.
Yes, absolutely, Amanda, and thank you, Rose, for the extraordinary work that you and your team do at the CTCN. To think that this organization didn't exist less than a decade ago, it's extraordinary where it is now. So just to give a brief overview of the work of the TEC in these 2 years, and I want to start by saying that the TEC, one of its fundamental roles is to provide advice to the parties to the Climate Convention and the Paris Agreement. So indeed, in these 2 years, the TEC has been producing a suite of key messages and recommendations to the parties on topics including technology needs assessments, technologies for averting, minimizing and addressing loss and damage in coastal zones, international collaborative research, development and demonstration, innovative approaches to stimulating the uptake of existing technologies and endogenous capacities and technologies. So a great deal of work, publications, but work that has as one of its endpoints advice, recommendations to the COP and the CMA. So if I could, of course, take you to some highlights of our work during this period. Of course, the first ever joint publication with the CTCN, which we are launching tonight and which we will hear more about shortly, and speaking not so much as the TEC chair, but as a member of the task force that put this together. It was a valuable collaboration involving not just TEC members, CTCN AB members, but of course our observers as well, who contribute so much, and indeed the consultant and the efforts of the two secretariats. The TEC is collaborating with the CTCN on technology and gender, but the TEC has also committed to integrating gender responsiveness and gender equality in our own work. Last year, for the first time, the TEC appointed from amongst its number 2 gender focal points, one from a developed country, one for a developing country, to collectively hold the TEC to account to mainstream gender responsiveness in our work, to provide accountability and ideas. And I'm delighted to be able to announce that this year, for the first time, the TEC achieved gender equality in our TEC events. In fact, we had more women than men participating in our events for the first time in the TEC's history. Now, this is a starting point. I suggest this is a minimal standard that we should be meeting, but it is at least a minimum for the future work of the TEC, and I suggest other bodies as well. And colleagues, let me be very frank with you. Not everybody in our world thinks that gender equality is important. Not everybody thinks that it should be supported or perhaps even mentioned. But it is 2021. Progress on gender equality is long overdue, and the TEC is and will continue to move forward. Now, the various key messages and recommendations that I mentioned to the COP and the CMA are drawn from and build upon a wealth of publications that the TEC have produced. I won't run through the list, but according to your interests of your country or your organization, I very much recommend that you have a look at some of these publications. A great deal of work has gone into them, again, building on the work of observers as well as TEC members. So I think this has been a very useful set of publications for multiple stakeholders. We have also in this period been building collaborations, notably through our Technology Day series of events, last year on climate smart agriculture, this year on the very important topic of ocean and coastal adaptation and resilience. I think the ocean-coastal nexus, its importance is becoming more and more apparent to many of us. And of course, this series of events continues here in Glasgow with an additional event coming up soon. So you're all very much welcome to the Technology Day event here in Glasgow. So I think I'll keep this snapshot of the TEC's activities very brief. Let me say one more thing. Of course, we, like everybody, were challenged by the pandemic. We kept our work going in virtual format necessarily. It's wonderful to be back here in person, of course, but I think that virtual work, particularly from some members whose internet connectivity is not as reliable as others, shows the collective commitment to this work, and I'd like to just record my thanks as a TEC chair for the collective work of everybody who's contributed. So thank you very much, Amanda.
Great, thanks, Stefan. And really, it's incredible the amount of work that's taken place in the past 2 years. I think everyone has been busy, locked at home, but finding things to keep themselves occupied. As Rose mentioned, we've had some really great collaborations, and I would really encourage you to check out the different resources that Stefan was alluding to as well. So with that, I'd like to actually turn to the main focus of tonight, which is the launch of this joint publication on technology and NDCs, stimulating the uptake of technologies in support of NDC implementation. And so we have Anne Barr with the joint TEC CTCN task force, who's going to walk us through the presentation or the publication tonight. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Can everybody hear me? So I'm speaking here as a member of the CTCN Advisory Board and a member of this task force representing ENGO, and it's a great honor for me to be able to present this publication. I must say also I am a member of the Women and Gender constituency, and in that sense I very much appreciate the words of Mr. Stefan Minas, chair of the TEC, regarding the need to strengthen gender equality in this convention, especially after the 2 years that we have experienced in COVID, and the COVID pandemic having a very specific burden on women with gender-based violence, loss of jobs, and lack of access to health services and to education for girls. So I think this is really important that we take time to think about this. Now, let's go to the publication. I've been very honored to volunteer as a member of this task force. And I will present to you how the process went to publish and to work and elaborate this joint publication, as well as focus on one of the case studies that have been proposed by the members of the task force in the publication. So we'll go to the next slide. I'm not sure if I can manage myself. Okay, right. So as already presented, this publication is the result of joint activities of the TEC of the CTCN as mandated by the COP. The objectives is to analyze technology issues related to NDCs, and it has been based on the analysis of revised NDCs provided until December 2020 and the findings related to the work on these NDCs, on technology specifically. The objective is also to identify success stories and lessons learned on the uptake of technologies. And I think that is where this publication is specifically interesting. The next slide. So the process. Since TEC 22 and the CTCN Advisory Board meeting 17, September 2020, there was a draft that was presented and discussion. So it was a very, thank you very much. It was a very participatory process with a lot of discussion. A joint task force was formed, of which I was a member, and case studies were presented by the members of that task force, and then a selection was made. There were several drafts of the publication presented to the TEC and the CTCN, and then key messages and recommendations were reviewed also by the members of the task force and are presented today. Next slide, yes, right. Oh yeah, okay, I think I need to go a little bit bigger here. Is it possible to go? Okay, right. Here is the structure of the publication. So of course there is some background information and then an overview on technology in revised NDCs, especially focusing on technology needs, the challenges that are experienced by parties, and then policy and implementation, and also national adaptation plans. When we look at the different needs in technology, we see that there are specific technology needs related to specific sectors, but also a lot of very general technology needs. And there are also demands of policy, regulatory and legal aspects. So the publication gives some information on all those different needs. There are observations and then recommendations. Let's focus now on one of the case studies. So the publication contains 8 case studies, and I choose to focus specifically on a case study about a technology developed in India, especially in Gujarat. And this technology has been developed by a social enterprise named Narita Services. I think we have a representative of that enterprise in the room. Very good, thank you. And their technology is called Bungaroo, and it is a stormwater management technology. It is specifically focused and adapted for regions where there are floods in the monsoon seasons that destroy crops. And after that, in the same regions, you have droughts. So basically, those are regions that are very much threatened by climate change and where food insecurity is extremely strong. The technology enables to store the water during the flood in underground aquifers and then to pump it during the droughts so that you can irrigate. And it basically transforms the life of the people because it enables to keep the crops living and even to turn actually from destroyed crops to sometimes up to 3 crops a year. In the pictures that you see how the technology is being developed and disseminated in the rural areas. As you see, women's groups are formed. Most of them are self-help groups. And they get to know the technology, to understand the technology, and to implement the technology collectively and manage it collectively. This solution provides, of course, solution as an adaptation to climate change and especially climate-induced floods and droughts, but also it enables to bring additional carbon sinks and improved soil fertility. So we can say that it is not only an adaptation but also a mitigation solution. In the next slide, okay. Good. I think I will continue with that slide. We see the transforming impact of that technology, and that is one element that I wanted to focus specifically on. As I explained, it enables rural households and especially farmers' household, and we have in those rural areas a lot of women-headed households to have several crops, so to increase their income and their revenue from several crops a year. But it also brings empowerment to women, as Narita Services has developed an intake philosophy and a proposal to the communities that the ownership of the technology is being handed over to the collective group of the women farmers so that they can really manage the technology collectively and also have the control over the resources, specifically the water in that case. And with this philosophy and with this implementation manner, the women are empowered to own the solution that enables them to produce the food. And so they also gain a lot of recognition in their own communities. And of course, they gain control over the value chain of what they produce. The key learnings from this case study is, first of all, a gender analysis is key to understand the barriers to technology access. What is also important to understand with Bungaroo is that it was taken on by the Ministry of Agriculture, the government of India, as one of the solutions that the Indian government wanted to bring to the population as a part of its rural policy, rural development policy, and also climate adaptation policy. And so dedicated loans were put in place as a policy measure for farmers. But in general, loans by bank or also by public policies have as criteria that you need to be a landowner. And that basically excludes women from access to the technology because most of the women are not landowners in India. And especially the very poor women-led households that actually form a majority of farmers in those areas. So by making a gender analysis, you can understand better the barriers to the technology, but also a gender-responsive implementation is key to identify opportunities to technology uptake, because Narita Services proved through the way they selected how to implement the technology, targeting collective ownership of women farmers, that these women farmers were able to, first of all, share the responsibility for the technology and also gradually improve the performance of the technology by sharing sharing their own experiences and their good practices. And in this sense, it has been a tremendous success, as Narita Services themselves have been able to deploy this technology by over 500 units and 5,000 through the policy measure of the Indian government, and now is developing strategic partnerships in many countries, Bangladesh, Ghana, Vietnam, and other countries in the future in Asia. So this technology has an immense potential given the gender responsiveness is taken into account. The participatory approach enables to fit exactly the local needs and to improve the appropriation of the technology. The technology has been developed to be adapted to different soil qualities and challenges. And there is constant research, as explained, that is conducted in collaboration with the beneficiaries that improves the performances. Let me go now to the joint key messages and recommendations of the publication in general. The recommendations are on fostering inclusive, participatory and equitable processes and approaches. As we have seen from these case studies, this is really very fundamental for a good technology uptake. Enhancing enabling environments and capacities, demonstrating success for replication and upscaling. So many of the other case studies and also the analysis of how technology is being implemented in the NDCs shows that success helps for the replication and the upscaling. Documenting and disseminating information is also key to ensure that technology uptake will support NDC implementation. And then including more information on technology in NDC is key. And finally, making more use of the technology mechanism, of course. With this, I thank you very much, and I hope I kept in time. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you so much. And yeah, a big round of applause for that. So we'll save a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers, both for our panel as well as for Anne on the publication. And with that, I actually want to introduce our panelists for tonight. So we have a really diverse set of speakers up here to share their reflections and their thoughts on the importance of this publication. I'll just quickly introduce them before we jump into it. We have Leandro Munoz, sorry, advisor with the Ministry of Science and Technology in Chile. We have Yeri Kim at the end, who is a master's student with the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. University of Michigan was actually a collaborator on this report, and Miri can talk a little bit about that. We have Susanna Obresch with UNDP, a climate policy specialist. And then last but not least, we have Deepa Pulani-Katil, who's an NDC coordinator in Eswatini. So with that, Leandro, I want to turn the first question to you. Increasing the uptake of climate technologies really requires systemic innovation and market approaches. So can you tell us what instruments or policies should policymakers put in place to really maximize the support for each step of the project development cycle? So from research to commercialization. Would love to hear your reflections on this, please.
Thank you, Amanda, and really thank you to the organizers for this invitation at this event. I would like to share with you some reflections about the process that we did in Chile in the elaboration of our first national strategy for climate technology development and transfer. We did it at the very exhausting time, because we were building up the Ministry of Science, which is very new in Chile, and at the same time we were the COP25 presidency, so it was very demanding time. And in that period we identified that we need a different approach to design the strategy, and then we decided to implement policy platform approach. The meaning of that is that we start the definitions and commitments from the NDC, from Chile, and from there, as a means of implementation of the NDC, we then designed and elaborate the process of the national strategy on technology transfer and development. And then this strategy started in defining those sectors that are a priority for us in order to face the challenges of the climate change, which are water, water for cities and also rural water, energy for the considering technologies for the production of energy. Chile has a very large comparative advantage to produce clean energies or renewables energy, and also energy for the mobilization within the cities. And the third sector that we define as a priority is the agri-food and forestry sector to develop and transfer technology. That was the first step. The second step was the linkages with this definition with the policy, the national policy of science and technology that we are now conducting in Chile. So in that national policy, we defined a specific topic for the development and transfer of technology. And then we did this connection between the NDC, the strategy, and the national policy of science and technology. Why we did that? Because we think that if we develop a specific project that could be successful, the learning or the possibility to have a more impact in the whole system of science and technology is very specific. So we think that this connection with the national policy of innovation, science, technology, and innovation is an opportunity to include some contents from the climate change also in the development and transfer of technology as a systematic perspective. This is the very macro perspective, and also the strategy considered the technology need assessment process, to develop the technology action plan. We have the support from CTCN to start this process in each one of the sectors that we establish as a priority. We hope to start very soon in this process and have the technology action plan and implement it using as a first stage the whole set of policy tools that we have available in order to foster innovation, financing, and also the technology transfer that we have now implementing in several aspects in Chile. But we expect that as soon as we have this first stage of technology development, have enough arguments to then update the national policy and then to have a bigger support to develop the process and update it in the future. Some things that we have learned in this preliminary stage is that the financing for technology is important, but also it's important to develop capacities in people to have a stress in order to develop human capacity development in the specific areas that we want to develop those technologies. And we haven't done before in Chile, and now we realize that today we are in several scenarios. We are talking about the mission-oriented actions, and we think that technology is one of those actions that we can orient the promotion and the development of human capital. And also, some of the things that we have faces in Chile, in our firms, is the linkages with the banking sector. So, to develop those policy tools that connect firms with bank and financing in order to reduce the risk assessment that the banking implement. We hope that with this support, the firms will absorb and innovate more in order to invest in those technologies. And finally, again, to coordinate those actions in a systemic perspective, we think that the governance is very important. We develop the design of the strategy in a multi-stakeholders perspective, including the private sector, the public sector, and also the academia. And we think that the implementation of the strategy also needs the same approach to include leading actors from the academia, from the public sector, and also the private sector. Indeed, all sectors are, and I remember with your presentation, thank you for that, all the sectors are connected with key ministries. For instance, in the case of Chile, the water is related to the Ministry of Public Works, where the issues of water are included. The agri-food and forestry, of course, is the Ministry of Agriculture, and also the energy with the Ministry of Energy. So we are developing a kind of a base, an institutional base to not just to develop the strategy, but also to be very active in terms to connect different policy tools. Thank you.
Leonardo, thank you so much. I think capacity, financing are two of the words that I'm hearing almost in every single session that I'm taking part of, and it's certainly clear that technology is no exception to that. I want to turn the floor next actually to Deepa and ask a very similar question. I think you bring a very different country perspective working in Eswatini currently. If you could tell a little bit about your perspective on the different steps of the technology development cycle. I know you've been doing a lot of work on gender as well, and it would be great to hear how that fits into this as well. So please, Deepa. And if you could keep your intervention maybe to 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So I can give a practical example from Eswatini of an NGO called Woman Farmer Foundation that collaborated with government to train women farmers in climate smart technologies. So they have a memorandum of understanding with Ministry of Agriculture, and they use equipment that government has for training the farmers, and they've been quite successful training thousands of farmers women farmers in Eswatini. The Ministry of Agriculture is also in their board of the Women Farmer Foundation, and they hold, and they for the past 10 years they used to hold annual award events for the best women farmers, and the selection of those women farmers were done collaboratively with government. So it was a very successful program, and they went on to get further funding from private sector through CSR funding, as well as from the UN, and they also collaborated with University of Eswatini, where university students would come and also participate and learn at their training sites. They set up one of the first climate smart tunnel farming systems in Eswatini. So it's been quite successful, and what I would say is that partnerships really contributed to their success. But when I spoke to the founder of Women Farmer Foundation, she was telling her journey was not easy. And that reminded me of one of the points that was said from the book, that you really need to do gender analysis. And for that, I would actually add gender and culture analysis. Because one of the first award winners from the Women Farmer Foundation, when they returned home with their huge amount of money and equipment that they got as the award, the reward from being the winner, they got a lot of pushback from their community. And one of their houses were even burnt down, not once but twice. So it's also about looking at cultural norms and about mentoring men to be prepared for the successes of their women that previously in the society they're not used to that. So that's where gender and culture really comes in. And that reminds me of the work that I've previously done in Malawi, where we also need to be careful about not just upscaling technology blindly. It may have worked very well in one part of the country, but may be completely not appropriate for another part of the country. For example, treadle pumps has worked really well in some communities, but in others it's not culturally appropriate for women to use treadle pumps, pedaling and having a child strapped to the back and so on. So when you bring in such technologies, you actually exclude a certain part of women from the community who could have benefited from that technology. So it's about gender analysis, but also about culture. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Deepa. I want to shift gears and actually turn to Yeri. So as a collaborator on this report, I think you're going to bring a really technical and expert perspective to this. You've been collaborating with CTCN. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this partnership looked like, the outcomes, and some of the results?
Is the mic working? Okay.
It is, yeah.
I'm wondering if we could have some slides on screen too, if that's okay. Thank you. So yeah, one of the greatest distinguishments of the University of Michigan are the networks we have. Our research projects advisor, Professor Jose Alfaro, teamed up with the director of the CTCN, Rose, and created a master's project analyzing expressed and perceived climate technology needs through the submitted NDCs. And then our team, Sarah Collins, Bhavesh, and Lauren Davis, applied to be involved in this project. And right here, this diagram shows our process on how we use the submitted NDCs up to July 31st, 2021 to create an application tool. We were focused on analyzing LDC, SIDS, Africa, and G77 countries, not including China. We used the technology taxonomy compiled by the CTCN to perform qualitative coding, compiled the data, and created a prototype application and analyzed the results. There were some undefined climate technologies the different countries mentioned in their NDCs the taxonomy did not include, and that is also highlighted through our work. We could then use our analysis and contrast it to the vulnerabilities and livelihood strategies that the different regions within their geographical and climate context were facing. We hope that our analysis and creation of the application and visualization tool of the updated NDCs would accelerate understanding of what technology needs would need to be fulfilled for knowledge transfer, resource allocation, and for the public and private market in knowing what to invest in. And so a little bit more on the information that we can access through the application. Here we can select certain regions or annexed sectors and access information of a visualization of NDC climate technologies prioritized by the countries. We can click on a specific technology that allows us to see which technologies are mentioned together by selected countries and provide a context around the technology and let users see which technologies go together and see the counts of technologies that are mentioned. And so here we show an analysis of Southeast Asia. As we have probably seen, the 6th IPCC report showed that monsoons and precipitation will increase, sea level will continue to rise, inundation in the Mekong Delta. And so the 3 NDCs in Southeast Asia we analyzed were Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, and our application shows that groundwater extraction, monitoring technology needs were mentioned in all 3 NDCs with mentions of integrated water resource management, flood forecasting systems, and etc. There already have been at least 25 technical assistance requests made by Southeast Asia to the CTCN, and through this analysis we've seen that there will be further increase in technical assistance requests, and there are constantly more updated NDC submissions. As we have seen, we haven't been able to look at, but yeah, so that's some of the information that we got.
Great, is this working? All right. Really, really impressive, the work that you're doing, and it's fantastic to see the actual technology application to understanding the technology in NDCs. I have a quick follow-up question for you as well, and I'd really love to hear your perspective as a youth working on these issues, how you think that youth can actually engage in climate change and technology.
Thank you for that question. I wanted to first give my personal take on being involved in this opportunity. I grew up in rural and suburban parts of Chiang Mai, Thailand. My parents focused on providing educational resources towards the rural youth. I have witnessed indigenous communities affected by the changing policies, tourism, lack of rights, the cycle of poverty, which were all affected by focus on growing the economy. And so having witnessed the operation of the CTCN focused on providing those needs specific to vulnerable communities through the international collaboration, diverse representation, rise in youth voices, using method of technology capacity building, which I believe it's one of the most important tools in local empowerment, was a huge encouragement for me. Youngo, which I have experienced their work here, is an amazing example of youth engagement in climate change and technology. And so continue to creating credibility and giving opportunities, experiences within the youth framework, I think should be emphasized. And I think the last thing I wanted to mention is prioritizing rural youth engagement in however practical method that can be used would be amazing to see in the future.
Great, thanks Yuri, and I would really commend CTCN and TEC for the engagement of youth in this publication as well. So we have one more panelist. I want to turn it to Susanna, and Susanna is with UNDP, who over the past couple of years has been incredibly busy supporting countries on NDC update. And so I want to round this out and hear a little bit about how you would link these. From the analysis that we just looked at, technology roadmaps have really emerged as fundamental in guiding effective technology transfer and supporting countries to implement their NDCs. Can you share a little bit more on your perspective, UNDP's perspective, on what makes a successful technology roadmap and what the key ingredients are for countries? Susanna.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. And I'm very happy to also contribute to this event because we at UNDP really see that in developing country NDCs, any ambition can only be achieved when there is sufficient implementation, and that's obviously very, very closely linked with technology. At UNDP, we are supporting countries on technology and a whole range of further topics. And UNDP's flagship initiative on climate is the Climate Promise. That's an initiative that's carried out in contribution to the NDC partnership, and it's an initiative that is supporting 120 countries worldwide to revise their climate commitments and also to implement their climate commitments. So these 120 countries really cover 83% of developing countries, and we are carrying out this support together, also using the UNDP Global Policy Network, as well as collaborating with 35 partners across the UN family, but also international financing institutions, civil society. And this work is being made possible by donors, including the governments of Germany, Sweden, Spain, Italy, the EU, and UNDP core contributors. And going forward, we are also very happy to have as additional donors also Iceland and Belgium. So what do we see in the NDC revisions that are coming in? And we very clearly see that countries are revising not only their ambition of the NDCs, but they are also getting much more specific than the initial round of NDCs was. And this is directly leading to roadmaps being created in countries that we see coming in. And so these roadmaps have different ingredients or elements, so to speak. Obviously, part of these roadmaps has to be roles and responsibilities for institutions, ministries, civil society organizations. Another crucial aspect in these roadmaps is finance, identifying what it costs to act, but also identifying what it costs not to act, to be able to clearly make a business case for action. And of course, also an important element of these roadmaps is technology. And there's a range of different activities that we at UNDP do to support countries in coming up with such roadmaps. That includes concrete support for new and innovative mitigation and adaptation measures, for instance, in Vanuatu, in many other countries. Also, broader support for identifying, prioritizing, and costing technology options for key NDC elements, for instance, in Cambodia and in many other countries. And then finally, also support to strengthening regulatory systems and institutional capacities, for instance, in Moldova, but also in many other countries. So, basically, there are many examples on how technology roadmaps have effective technology transfer in supporting NDC implementation, and I would group them thematically. There's technology for mitigation and energy sectors. There's technology for adaptation, technology for institutional and policy strengthening. And also, as we have heard from the fellow speakers, also the element of gender consideration is increasingly also being linked to the question of technology. So we see out of the 79 enhanced NDCs that have been coming in, we see 25, so around a third, has linked gender considerations to technology transfer. So just to round it up with two more concrete examples, we have one technology for mitigation and one technology for adaptation. Technology for mitigation, I would like to pick the example of Vanuatu. Here we have worked together with Vanuatu on the technology roadmap to eventually install modular solar energy grids. So that is one way of being able to connect communities to electricity off the big electricity grid. And in this case, that was a collaboration with power blocks from Switzerland. So there were these modules come in like different cubes, and they can be plugged together like Lego pieces to create what's called an energy swarm. So it can be scaled up, it can be scaled down, depending on whether there's an increased or decreased energy demand. And that also helped on the island Lelepa on Vanuatu to phase out diesel generators and to provide more efficient solutions for solar home systems. And to close, one example on adaptation and technology transfer, and that's from Peru. And this one is on water harvesting with what we call fog catchers. So that was piloting an ecosystem-based adaptation approach using nets that are being installed outside in areas in Peru that see very, very decreased rainfall to really capture that water and to use it as one technology approach to improve the water provision within that area. These are just a few examples. There are obviously so many more, but I'll stop here, and we clearly see how countries are using technology roadmaps to move forward on NDC implementation. Thank you.
Thanks, Susanna, and it's really great to hear the broad perspective and the examples that UNDP and Climate Promise brings, and we look forward to seeing how you're going to implement all of this over the next years. So we have just a few minutes left, and I would like to open the floor for any questions that there might be in the audience. We have 2 mics on either side. I would invite you to please come up if you have any questions. If you can please state your name and who you're directing the question at, and if you could please keep it brief. We'll have about 5 to 7 minutes for questions.
Okay, hi, thank you so much. I'm Catherine Romanak from the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm not sure who to direct the question to, but I'm just a little bit confused on how you go about aiding these countries, specifically, well, with NDC implementation, but more so with TNAs, because what we seem to be finding is that for example, when you help a country to get it, do their TNAs, many times I don't know how this needs to come from the country, right? All of these technologies need to come from the country, and yet many times, how do you help them with their own technologies? Is what I'm asking, because there's so many technologies, but they have to be the ones to choose it. And many times a technology that's right for a country may not be included because there's an external person helping them. I'm just not clear on how that works.
Thank you. Do you want to answer that, Rose? Yeah. Okay, so Rose, if you want to, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. That's an important question. I like to take credit for the answer, but actually the answer lies in the member states. Precisely to address, the credit goes to the member states, precisely to address the issue you raised, how do we go about conducting the technical needs assessment, and how do we determine what technologies actually countries need? The member states here are very clear when they established the technology mechanism and the CTCN as the implementation arm of that mechanism, that all the support must be demand-driven. And so as part of the mechanism of our delivery, they established 161 national designated entities whose sole responsibility is to work with us to originate the national needs regarding their technology needs and then submit them to us. So, and every year as part of the scope, we report back to the member states. These national designated entities, the majority of them are negotiators, and they validate that these are their national needs. So people like Leonardo here. So you're very right, this is very demand-driven. It is exactly within the national priorities and the national designated entities, many of whom sit in ministries of environment, but some increasingly in the ministries of science and technology, and some in the Ministry of Energy, are the ones who determine the the type and nature of technologies we enable the transfer. Lastly, a large part of our work focuses on endogenous technologies. Stephen put up very interesting publications you should read. Part of our mandate is also to support the development of systems of national innovation, including the promotion of endogenous technologies, such as Bungaro. That's why we featured it, so that it's not just externally driven technological transfer.
Stefan, do you want to add something?
Well, you've taken my answer there, Rose, but no, but you're absolutely right, and it's a vital issue, and I would recommend our publication on endogenous capacities in countries, and I'd take the opportunity to pay tribute to our dear colleague Marilyn Averill from the University of Colorado Boulder, who really led on that. So a different publication, but one that goes directly to that point.
Great, please go ahead. Sorry, can we get the mic?
Other mic?
Yeah, why don't you try this? Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, I think I'm good. So my name is Sanne and I work for Women Engaged for a Common Future, and I'm here also with the Women and Gender constituency. So I'm really happy that we've heard so many examples of how we're integrating gender when it comes to technology uptake for the NDC implementations. And my question is directed to Mr. Munoz from Chile. If you could share a little bit about how you're integrating gender into your new strategies that you're developing right now, because we haven't really heard your perspective on that. So I'm very curious to hear that. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for this question. Yeah, it is very by the time that we were building up the Ministry of Science, we realized that this gender gap in the science, technology, and innovation in Chile. So we, in the parallel process, while we were working on the definition of the National Policy of Science and Technology and Innovation, we also developed a strategy, which is like a national policy as well, for the gender, to tackle the gender gap in the science, technology, and innovation. So we are just launching that national policy in Chile because we want a more balanced participation between men and women in the not just in the academia, but also in firms and also in the public sector. Indeed, in our case, for instance, most of the directors or most of the representatives of the ministry are women, in order to send the message to the ecosystem that we are implementing now. One of the things that is being very interesting for us is when you are creating a new institution, you have the possibility to reorganize the institution in that sense. So we are including the gender perspective in that sense. We hope that there is a huge goal by the 2050 to have a balanced participation between. We have a very huge gap. We have more work to do on that, but we hope that by the middle of the century, we will tackle this difference.
Thank you. So I think we have time for one more brief question. Please go ahead.
So much. So I'm Kathy from Yango and WGC, also one of the ambassadors of COP appointed by the UK. So as some of you know, that I'm also a task force member at the TEC, also follows CTCN and TEC meetings. So I guess thanks, and also very, very happy to see Yeri from Yango doing the presentation, and also my colleague Anne from WGC also presenting. So very proud to see the representation, and I believe all the panelists have highlighted the importance of civil society stakeholders, namely youth, women, and indigenous peoples. And I guess specifically a question would be to both Rose and Stephen about how do you see the importance of gender in the work of the CTCN and the TEC. Thank you.
Rose, if you want to start.
Thank you, Kathy. I like to tell people that technology is about people. Every technological innovation that we work with to facilitate the transfer really is improving the quality of the lives of the people in the countries that is being requested. So whether it is water or access to energy or energy efficiency or climate smart agriculture. So we think of the work we do that way. So when we present our report, as I told you to look at it, and we tell you that our work has benefited close to 100 million people, we literally mean it. We can count the number of people that have been able to gain access to water because of technology we've presented them, or the number of people who have had access to energy because of the technology we've enabled, or agricultural production, the number of families or communities that have had improved access to food because of the agricultural technology. So it's really about people. And I think if you look at the COP here, Earth to Planet, that's really very important.
Thanks. Stephen.
Absolutely. Well, I hope I'm audible. Not really.
Yes.
It's working now. I can only echo what Rose said, and I just add this, that we're a technology committee, but technologies are things or they're methods or they're processes. The question is, what are the outcomes of technologies? We're engaged in technology for climate action, climate mitigation, climate adaptation, but what that also means is building a fairer world, because we know that the effects of climate fall disproportionately in several ways, but disproportionately also on women. So this is fundamental to what we're doing. There's a lot that we as the TEC have to learn collectively. We've tried to improve. We have a long way to go. I hope that also the composition of the TEC reflects the importance of gender equality, but that's a matter for parties, not for the TEC. Thank you.
Thank you. And so with that, we have a few minutes left, and I actually want to turn it to Omedi Jura, who's the Vice Chair of the CTCN Advisory Board, to deliver some closing remarks this evening. Please, over to you.
Thank you. And good evening, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants in this forum this evening. I want to thank you very much for turning up to attend and participate in this event. My name is Omedi Jura. I serve in the advisory board of the CTCN, and I'm happy to be part of your host today. You have heard for yourselves, and I know that each and every one of you has a story somewhere that you would have liked to tell as well on what is going on, because you have participated in one way or another in technology development and transfer wherever you are. So I want to thank the panelists very much. We have heard for ourselves, and it's very, very motivating to see that technology is one of the things that is required, is imperative for transformation. And we've talked about transformation all along, and we can see that it starts in a little way, but can proceed on to be something so big if it is taken care of in the right way. It's an enabler, of course. And now every country has an obligation, and that is in their NDCs, to be able to implement and give results and contribute globally as required. And without technology as an enabler, this is not going to be really possible. We are told that we learn a lot better by listening to stories, and that is true. And that's how indigenous knowledge has been passed in the past through ages. to a point that you will see that communities are resilient and can stay on even in the worst attacks that may come, because they have some element of resilience. But all these can be taken up, developed further, and used at scale to benefit other people as well. So, very impressive from what I've heard from many of you in the panel here today. And of course, the CTCN is doing its best so that we can integrate all these things and make use of them for the benefit of the whole continent, the whole world, that is the globe. I want to thank my colleague Minas from the TEC. Thank you very much for being here in better time than me, because we were in the negotiation together. You managed to sneak away. That was good. We must make time also for these very important events that bring us together. Of course, we have talked about TNAs, we have talked about roadmaps, we've talked about many things. You would be in a better position to summarize this than even myself. These are important knowledge, information that we need to have and to use and to develop further. The entire technology cycle is very, very useful and can be applied even at a very local level. And we've seen analysis and synthesis of the TNAs. I can tell you a short story that when we started the Technology Executive Committee, I was among the first people to be there. And TNAs had been done, but nothing was done with them. And then a synthesis was done of the TNAs. Of course, every TNA was done independently, differently from others in different countries. But what we saw from the synthesis was very interesting, that you could get similarities in priorities. And what came out is that technologies for adaptation and water were the priority. And we see that even in our NAPs today, National Adaptation Plans, really. So we still need to work together. There's so much ahead. And we welcome you. This is just the beginning. Let's work together on this and make use of the publication we have, critique it and add value to it as well, and add also something that can be done. I had some very interesting questions here. How do we customize the technology that is locally available for upscaling? All those answers are with you people. All I want to do is to appreciate and to say that really we are in a direction together, that we walk together. And I must emphasize what we have done together with the women constituency, that we have seen bringing transformation. What was presented here on Bunguru has actually shown, indicated that it can bring big changes. We still have to look at it at another level critically and be able to see how we leverage its use for transformation. I appreciate the youth so much. And even right now, as we are working in the negotiations, I have some youth working with me directly. And I've seen what they can do. Very interesting, but that's a story for another day. What I would like to say now is thank you very much. Have a very fine evening. Join us in the next events that we'll be having. We have quite a lot of them, and technology events. Also, don't forget to visit our website, very rich. And remember one thing, knowledge is a treasure, but practice is the key to it. Let's go and practice. Thank you very much.